I hope you are prepared for a gigantic shock.
Dick Beyer's life in wrestling is a funny kind of story. Funny not because it's lighthearted, but because of the twists. If you know him as the Destroyer, the masked man who became one of the most famous wrestlers in the world, you might think he loved that role from the start. But the truth is almost the opposite. He hated the mask. He hated the whole idea. Then how did he become so great? Let's find out. He grew up in Buffalo, New York, born in 1930, right during the Great Depression. Buffalo was a tough city then, filled with working-class families who survived by sticking together and grinding things out. That kind of environment teaches you toughness, and Beyer carried that with him his whole life. No matter how far he went or how much fame he earned, he always carried Buffalo's blue-collar spirit with him. As a kid, he loved sports, and he turned out to be good at pretty much everything he touched. At Seneca Vocational High School, he played 4 sports and became an all-city player in football. That opened the door to Syracuse University, where he got a full scholarship. That was huge for him and his family, and he made the most of it. At Syracuse, he wasn't just a player, he was a standout. On the football team, he became a 3-time Letterman and co-captain of the school's first ever Orange Bowl squad in 1952. At the same time, he wrestled, winning conference titles and climbing into the ranks of the Amateur Athletic Union. In 1953, the school gave him the ultimate honor, Syracuse Athlete of the Year. He wasn't just some kid playing a sport anymore. He was one of the best athletes in the school's history, and he wasn't only about sports. He earned a bachelor's and a master's degree in education, worked as a teacher, and was also an Eagle Scout. After graduation, he stayed at Syracuse, coaching football under the legendary Ben Schwartzwalder and teaching in New York. To most people, it looked like he had it all mapped out: a solid job, a career in education, a future in coaching. But in 1954, almost by chance, he stepped into professional wrestling. At the time, he didn't think of it as a lifelong thing. He figured he would wrestle for 5 years, make some money, then settle into teaching full-time. It was more of a side plan than a calling, but almost immediately people noticed him. Within a year, he was named Rookie of the Year by Wrestling Life magazine. For 8 years, he wrestled as himself, Dick Beyer, playing the baby face the good guy fans could cheer for. It fit him perfectly. He was clean-cut, believable, and had real athletic credibility. This was important to him. He wasn't just pretending to be an athlete, he was one. And he believed that's why fans respected him. That's also why the idea of putting on a mask felt so wrong. To him, masked wrestlers were gimmicks, a little cartoonish, not to be taken seriously. He had spent his whole life building a reputation as a real sportsman, someone whose success came from skill and discipline. Why would he cover that up? The moment that forced the issue came in 1962. Beyer went out to California expecting to continue as Dick Beyer, the babyface. But promoter Jules Strongbow had other plans. He wanted Beyer to become a masked heel called the Destroyer. Strongbow thought Beyer had the talent to pull it off, and he wasn't alone. Freddie Blassie, one of the biggest names in the business, vouched for him. But Beyer hated the idea. He had spent years promoting himself under his own name, even printing glossy pamphlets with his photo. Now he was supposed to throw that away and cover his face? He refused. And then came the mask itself. It wasn't even his. Another wrestler, Vic Christie, lent him one, and it was awful. Made of heavy wool, it buttoned around his body and fastened in the crotch. It was hot, itchy, and suffocating. His vision was bad, breathing was worse, and the whole thing made him feel trapped. He toughed it out for the match, but the moment it was over, he ripped it off, threw it at the promoter, and said, "That's it, never again." At that point, the Destroyer was dead before it even started. But wrestling has a way of pulling people in, and Beyer's mind started to change when 2 things happened. First, another wrestler, Ox Anderson, handed him a better mask. This one wasn't made of wool, it was made from a woman's girdle. As strange as that sounds, it was perfect. It was light, stretchy, and breathable. Suddenly, Beyer could see, breathe, even talk with it on. He liked it so much he went down to Woolworth's to buy more girdles in his size so he could make spares. Just like that, the mask wasn't torture anymore. The second thing that changed his mind was money. Freddie Blassie had told him the mask would lead to bigger opportunities, and he was right. Within just a few weeks of wrestling as the Destroyer, Bayer's paychecks tripled. For a man with a family to support, there was no ignoring that. Suddenly, what had seemed insulting was starting to look like the smartest career move he could make. By the fall of 1962, he called Syracuse University and told them he wasn't coming back to coach football. Wrestling had become his full-time path. What's interesting is that even then, Bayer never suddenly fell in love with the mask. He never looked in the mirror and thought, "This is who I am now." What he realized instead was that the mask was a tool. It gave him mystery. It made him more menacing as a villain, which meant bigger matches and bigger crowds. It gave him flexibility, and later he would use it to wrestle under more than one identity. And it protected his career, especially in Japan, where masked wrestlers were seen as exotic and exciting. So the mask he hated became the mask that defined him. As the Destroyer, Bayer didn't just get popular, he became one of the biggest wrestling stars in the world. By the early 60s, Dick Bayer had figured something out that most wrestlers never really did. That mask he wore wasn't just part of the outfit. It wasn't a gimmick to use for a while and then toss aside. It was everything. The Destroyer didn't work without it. That's why in 1963, when promoter Jules Strongbow told him it was time to finally take it off, Bayer wouldn't budge. Strongbow thought fans had seen enough of the mask. In his mind, pulling it off would be the next big twist. But Bayer knew better. The Destroyer was still drawing big crowds. The mask was the reason people bought tickets. Losing it wasn't some dramatic payoff. It would have killed the whole act. Bayer even said later, "I never took it off," and he meant it. That mask had become his whole identity in the business. When Strongbow tried to force the issue by booking a lumberjack match where the unmasking was supposed to happen, Bayer came up with his own plan. In the middle of the match, he went down like he was hurt, then sprinted to the back and straight into a waiting car that peeled off. Just like that, he was gone. It was gutsy, especially at a time when promoters held all the cards. But Bayer knew he had to protect the character. He spent some time working for Don Owen up in the Northwest, keeping a promise he'd made before all this went down. That gave Strongbow space to cool off. Eventually, Strongbow swallowed his pride, admitted he'd been wrong, and even apologized. That almost never happened in wrestling back then. When Bayer came back to Los Angeles, the mask stayed. And after that, everybody knew one thing for sure: the Destroyer wasn't just another promoter's gimmick. It belonged to Dick Bayer. That story only made the mask even more of a legend. And Bayer, always sharp, leaned right into it. He made fans believe nobody could ever get it off. When he feuded with Freddie Blassie, Blassie promised he'd rip the thing apart. In their match, he actually tore it off, only to find another mask underneath. The place went nuts. Later, when Blassie managed to pull that second mask off, Bayer grabbed a towel, covered his face, and ran. Fans never saw his face. The mystery stayed intact. It might have looked like chaos, but it was carefully planned. He kept raising the stakes too. He'd challenge opponents, saying if they could beat him 2 out of 3 falls, he'd take the mask off. Nobody ever pulled it off, but just the thought of it had fans glued to the action. Away from the ring, he was just as strict. He kept the mask on backstage and wouldn't take it off until he was home alone. That commitment blurred the line between the man and the character. The mask also gave him room to show personality. As the Destroyer, he wasn't just another angry villain yelling at the crowd. He was sarcastic, smart, and cocky. He played off his real background, bragging about being a Syracuse grad with a master's degree. In Hawaii, he'd insult fans by saying he was smarter than anybody who went to school there. On the West Coast, he'd make similar digs. It worked everywhere he went. And he wasn't all talk. Bayer was a legit athlete. A lot of bad guys at the time were just brawlers, but he could wrestle. His figure 4 leg lock became his calling card. He also had little tricks that made him stand out. He'd throw a punch with a closed fist, then quietly tell the ref to check him. When the ref asked, Bayer would raise his hands and say, "No, open hand." The crowd would explode. He was controlling the story with small, clever moves. He was just as smart about his career outside the ring. In the American Wrestling Association, he wrestled under another mask as Dr. X. That way, he could work a new market without messing up the Destroyer's mystique. Sometimes Dr. X even got unmasked, but it didn't matter because Bayer was keeping that identity separate. He wanted to wrap up Dr. X anyway, since he and his family were getting ready to head to Japan, where the Destroyer was about to become something much bigger. Japan was where the mask really turned into legend. When Bayer first got there, no one had seen anything like him. He was the first masked wrestler to appear regularly, and he couldn't have picked a better moment. Wrestling was exploding in popularity. His 1963 match with Rikidozan was a turning point. Rikidozan wasn't just a wrestler, he was a national hero. Their match was broadcast on TV, and something like 70 million people watched it. That's still one of the biggest audiences ever for wrestling anywhere in the world. And Bayer beat him. He was the last man to do it before Rikidozan's untimely death. That night made the Destroyer a household name in Japan. He kept going back, wrestling hundreds of matches a year under a deal with Giant Baba and NTV. He had legendary series with Mil Máscaras. And even when he wrestled Baba himself in the States, the matches sold out. He wasn't just a foreign attraction. He became part of the fabric of Japanese wrestling. And through all of it, the mask tied it all together. The thing he didn't even want at first became the tool that let him take control of his own career, protect his character, and become a global icon. The Destroyer wasn't just a gimmick, it was Dick Bayer's masterpiece. As time went on, the mask that once felt like a cage became the very thing that set Dick Bayer free. It gave him a character larger than life, a role that let him connect with fans in ways few wrestlers ever could. And while the Destroyer was arrogant, sarcastic, and always looking to bend the rules in the ring, Dick Bayer outside the mask was just the opposite. He was approachable, generous, and deeply committed to the people around him. When his wrestling days wound down, he didn't fade quietly into the background. Instead, he carried the same energy and creativity into new parts of his life. He coached high school sports, giving kids the kind of mentorship that lasts long after the games are over. He co-founded the Ilio de Paulo Scholarship Fund, making sure young athletes had opportunities for education. And he stayed connected to fans with Destroyer Park Golf, where people could come not just to play, but to meet the man who had entertained them for decades. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about community. Japan, of course, never forgot him. Over there, he wasn't just a wrestler. He was a household name. His TV appearances, his Christmas album, his unforgettable matches, all built a bond with the Japanese public that lasted a lifetime. When he was awarded the Order of the Rising Sun, one of Japan's highest honors, it was proof that his impact went far beyond the ring. Wrestling had made him a star, but his character and kindness made him something more, a cultural bridge between two countries. When Dick Bayer passed away in 2019 at the age of 88, the tributes poured in from all over the world. Fans remembered the arrogance of the Destroyer, the villain they loved to hate. Friends, family, and colleagues remembered the teacher, the coach, the father, and the humanitarian. And in that contrast, you see the full picture of his life. The mask he once resisted became the thing that defined him, not because it hid who he was, but because it let him show so many sides of himself. It gave him the chance to be the villain in the ring, the entertainer on TV, the cultural ambassador abroad, and still, at home, just dad or coach. That's why his legacy lasts. Dick Bayer's story is one of transformation. He turned doubt into strength, discomfort into mastery, and a simple wrestling gimmick into a legend that crossed borders and generations. The Destroyer will always be remembered as one of wrestling's greatest masked men, but the man behind the mask, Dick Bayer, will always be remembered as someone who knew how to take what life gave him and turn it into something unforgettable. If you enjoyed learning about his story, don't forget to give this video a like. It really helps the channel out. And if you want more wrestling history, classic stories, and deep dives into legends of the sport, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future uploads. We'd also love to hear from you. What's your favorite memory of the Destroyer? Was it one of his legendary matches, his time in Japan, or maybe his larger-than-life personality outside the ring? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and we read every single one. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.